On Christmas night, she was thrown out for being infertile, until a widowed duke whispered, "Come with me." When you discover that value is conditional, the pain cuts deeper for having believed you mattered in the first place. That's how Lysandra's story begins. She had believed in fairy tales once. Not the kind with magic and dragons, but the quieter sort, the ones that promised marriage meant partnership, that love could grow where vows were planted, that a woman's worth extended beyond her ability to bear children. She'd clung to these stories through 2 years of disappointment, through pitying looks from physicians and whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Hope was a treacherous thing, as it turned out, because when it finally shattered, you suffered not just the humiliation of your circumstances, but the ache of having dared to believe you were more than a womb. Hello, everyone. Before we dive into tonight's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic tales of passion, power, and forbidden love. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Thank you so much. Now, let us return to our story. The grand parlor of the Vale estate blazed with light on this Christmas night. Candles flickered in every window, their golden glow spilling onto fresh snow. Laughter echoed from the dining hall where the family gathered, glasses of wine catching the firelight like rubies. The scent of roasted goose and spiced cider filled the air, warmth and abundance everywhere. Everywhere except where Lysandra stood. She faced them in the center of the parlor, still wearing the green silk gown she donned hopefully that morning. It had been a gift from her husband on their wedding day, back when she'd still believed he might care. Back when she'd been useful. Lady Cordelia Vale stood before her, the matriarch's face cold as the winter night beyond the windows. Her mother-in-law had never liked her. That much had been clear from the beginning, but there had at least been civility. Tolerance. That thin veneer had cracked tonight, revealing the contempt beneath. 2 years, Lady Cordelia said, her voice cutting through the festive noise like a blade through silk. 2 years of my son's prime wasted. 2 years of resources spent on physicians, herbs, treatments. 2 years of this family's patience. Lysandra's hands trembled at her sides. Around the room, other family members had grown quiet, turning to watch. Her husband's sisters, his cousins, the aunts and uncles who'd welcomed her with false smiles and genuine calculation. "I tried," Lysandra whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "I did everything. Everything except the one thing that mattered." Lady Cordelia's eyes were hard as flint. A wife who cannot produce an heir is not a wife at all. She is a burden, a decorative failure. Lysandra's gaze snapped to her husband. Lord Tristan Vale stood by the fireplace, one hand resting on the marble mantel, his profile illuminated by dancing flames. He was handsome in the way expensive things often were, polished, refined, ultimately hollow. She'd learned that too late. "Tristan," she said, her voice breaking. "Please." He didn't turn, didn't even flinch. He simply lifted his wineglass to his lips and drank, as if she hadn't spoken. As if she'd already ceased to exist. Something inside Lysandra cracked at that moment, not loudly, but with the quiet finality of ice giving way beneath weight. Lady Cordelia snapped her fingers, and 2 servants appeared at Lysandra's sides. Young men she'd seen every day for 2 years, who'd served her breakfast and brought her tea. They wouldn't meet her eyes now. "Remove her jewelry," Lady Cordelia commanded. Lysandra stood frozen as strange hands reached for her. The sapphire necklace that had been her wedding gift, unclasped and taken. The pearl earrings her mother had given her before she died, plucked away. The gold bracelet, the ruby ring, the delicate chain at her wrist. Finally, inevitably, her wedding band. She made a sound, small, wounded, as the servant pulled it from her finger. The metal was still warm from her skin. "The dress as well," Lady Cordelia said. "It belongs to this house." "Mother," one of Tristan's sisters spoke up, uncomfortable. "It's snowing outside." Then she should have considered that before proving herself defective. Lady Cordelia's smile was poisonous. Give her the old cloak from the servants' quarters. That's enough charity. They brought her a threadbare thing, moth-eaten and torn, barely thick enough to keep out the cold. Lysandra wrapped it around herself with shaking hands as they escorted her from the parlor, down the grand hallway where she'd walked as a bride, toward the entrance she'd once believed would be her home forever. The Christmas tree stood in the foyer, magnificent and mocking, decorated with gold ribbon and glass ornaments. Her feet, still in delicate silk slippers, left prints on the marble floor. She could hear the party resuming behind her, laughter bubbling up as if nothing had happened, as if she'd already been forgotten. The servants opened the front doors, and winter rushed in like a living thing, stealing her breath. "Wait," Lysandra gasped, turning back. "My things, my clothes, my mother's letters." "Compensation," Lady Cordelia said from the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light. "For the resources wasted on your inadequacy. You came to us with a dowry, girl. You leave with what you've earned. Nothing." The servants pushed her forward, not roughly, but with the efficiency of those following orders. Lysandra stumbled down the stone steps into the snow. The cold bit through her thin slippers immediately, sharp as teeth. Behind her, the great iron gates of the Vale estate swung shut with a clang that echoed across the frozen grounds. She stood there for a long moment, her breath clouding in the air, staring at the house through the bars. Every window glowed. She could see figures moving inside, celebrating, drinking, laughing. The world continued without her as if she'd never existed. Christmas bells rang from the village church a mile distant, calling the faithful to midnight mass. The sound was beautiful and terrible, a reminder that somewhere people were gathering in warmth and love. Lysandra's legs gave out. She collapsed in the snow beside the gate, the cold seeping through her thin cloak and dress. Her feet had gone numb. Her hands, too. She should get up. She should walk to the village, find shelter, find help. But what was the point? 2 years of trying. 2 years of monthly hope followed by crushing disappointment. 2 years of physicians examining her like livestock, of herbs that tasted like dirt and prayers that echoed in empty air. 2 years of watching her husband's affection curdle into indifference, then contempt. She'd believed she mattered. She'd believed wrong. The cold was almost gentle now, like a blanket pulling her down. Her eyes drifted closed. Snow fell soft against her cheeks, melting into tears she was too tired to shed. Somewhere in the distance, she heard horse hooves, the jingle of a carriage. But Lysandra didn't move. She was too tired to care, too tired to hope that help might come. The sounds grew closer. Stopped. Then, a man's voice, deep and commanding, cutting through the quiet night. "Stop the carriage." The carriage door opened with a sharp click that cut through the winter silence. Lysandra heard it through the fog of cold that had settled over her mind, but she didn't open her eyes. What did it matter? Another traveler passing by, perhaps stopping to wonder at the pathetic creature collapsed by the roadside before moving on. She'd become an object of pity in mere hours. How fitting. Footsteps crunched in the snow. Closer. Closer still. Then they stopped. A pause heavy with assessment. Lysandra waited for the judgment, the disgust, the hurried retreat. Instead, she heard the rustle of heavy fabric, felt displacement in the air beside her. Something warm and impossibly soft settled over her shoulders. Her eyes fluttered open in confusion. A cloak, not the threadbare rag she wore, but a magnificent thing of thick black wool lined with fur. It carried the scent of cedar and something else, something dark and expensive. The weight of it alone was a comfort, pressing down like an embrace. "Can you stand?" The voice was deep, cultured, edged with command, but not cruelty. Lysandra tilted her head up and found herself staring at a man who seemed carved from the winter night itself. He was tall, she could tell even with him crouching beside her, and dressed entirely in black save for a deep gray waistcoat. His face was all sharp angles and harsh planes, handsome in a severe, unforgiving way. Silver threaded through his dark hair at the temples, and his eyes. His eyes were the color of steel in winter, gray and piercing and utterly unreadable. Duke Caelan Draven, though Lysandra didn't know his name yet. She knew only that he was someone important, someone far above her station, and she was mortified. Her voice came out as a rasp. Her throat was raw from the cold. Leave me, please. I'm nothing. Something flickered in those steel eyes, not pity, but something harder to name. His gloved hand reached out, fingers gentle but firm beneath her chin, tilting her face toward the moonlight. He studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she found she couldn't. On Christmas night, he said quietly, no one is nothing. Before she could protest, he slid one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted her as easily as if she weighed no more than snow. Lysandra made a weak sound of protest, her hands pushing feebly against his chest, but her strength had long since fled. I can't, you don't understand, I'm disgraced. Then you'll be disgraced somewhere warm. His tone allowed no argument. He carried her to the carriage, and when the door opened, warmth spilled out like a miracle. The interior was lined with deep burgundy velvet, and a small brass warmer glowed beneath one of the seats. It was a world utterly different from the cold, from everything she'd known for the past 2 years, if she was honest. Caelan set her down with unexpected care, then turned to the driver. To Dravenfall. Quickly. Your Grace, the driver began. Quickly, Thomas. The driver's protest died. Yes, Your Grace. The carriage lurched into motion, and Lysandra found herself pressed back against cushions softer than her marriage bed had ever been. She trembled violently now, her body coming back to life in painful increments. The Duke settled across from her, his presence filling the small space. He reached for something beside him, a silver thermos, and poured steaming liquid into a small cup. The scent of mulled wine and spices filled the air, making Lysandra's empty stomach clench. Drink, he said, offering the cup. She reached for it, but her hands shook so badly the wine nearly sloshed over the rim. Before she could pull back in shame, his hands were there, steady and sure, wrapping around hers. Not taking the cup away, but supporting her grip, guiding it to her lips. The wine burned down her throat like liquid fire, and she gasped. But oh, the warmth of it. The sweetness. When had she last tasted something so good? Slowly, he murmured. Lysandra obeyed, taking small sips, acutely aware of his hands still steadying hers. They were large, she noticed, strong. Even through his gloves and her numbness, she could feel the heat of them. When the cup was empty, he took it back without comment and returned it to its place. Then he simply sat, watching her with that unreadable expression as the carriage rolled through the night. You're not going to ask, Lysandra finally whispered. Ask what? Why was I there? What happened? What I did to deserve? Her voice broke. Caelan was quiet for a long moment. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft against the carriage windows. I find, he said at last, that most people who end up in the snow on Christmas night didn't do anything to deserve it. The world is simply cruel. The simplicity of it, the lack of judgment, made something crack in Lysandra's chest. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She'd cried enough. She'd been weak enough. Where are you taking me? She asked instead. Dravenfall. My estate. You'll have shelter, food, medical attention. He paused. And time. For whatever comes next. I can't pay you. I don't recall asking for payment. Lysandra studied him, this strange duke who'd appeared like something from a story. But she was done with stories, wasn't she? Done with hoping for rescue. Still, she was too cold and too tired to refuse. The carriage began to slow, and Lysandra looked out the window. Her breath caught. The Draven estate rose before them like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. It was massive, all Gothic spires and dark stone, beautiful in a severe, imposing way. Windows glowed with warm light, but the architecture itself seemed designed to intimidate. Gargoyles perched at the corners. Iron gates stood open like a mouth. The carriage stopped before the grand entrance doors, and servants appeared immediately, moving with practiced efficiency. They looked at their master, then at Lysandra, and she saw curiosity in their faces but, surprisingly, no contempt. Callan descended first, then turned to offer his hand. Lysandra took it, her legs nearly buckling as her frozen feet touched the ground. "Careful," he said, his grip tightening. An elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair appeared at the entrance, her expression shifting from professional courtesy to concern when she saw Lysandra's state. "Mrs. Brennan," Callan said, "prepare the East Wing guest chamber. Send for Dr. Aldrich. And bring warm food, soup, bread, nothing too heavy." "At once, Your Grace." Mrs. Brennan moved forward, offering her arm to Lysandra with a gentle smile.
"Come, dear.
"Let's get you warm." Lysandra let herself be led toward the entrance, but something made her glance back. The Duke stood in the shadows of the great hall, the light from the chandelier not quite reaching him. He was watching her with that same unreadable expression, and for a moment their eyes met. What was he thinking? Why had he helped her? Would you subscribe to see where this mysterious rescue leads? Drop a comment if you think the Duke has his own secrets. Then, from somewhere above, a small voice called out, "Papa? Who is she?" Lysandra's gaze snapped to the grand staircase. A child stood there, a boy of perhaps 6 or 7, with dark hair and solemn eyes that mirrored his father's. He clutched a stuffed horse and wore a nightshirt, clearly supposed to be in bed.
A child.
The Duke had a son. "Back to bed, Ether," Callan said, his voice softening in a way Lysandra wouldn't have thought possible moments before. "But who?"
"Bed. Now."
"We'll talk in the morning." The boy hesitated, studying Lysandra with open curiosity, then nodded and disappeared back up the stairs. Mrs. Brennan gently tugged Lysandra forward, and the last thing she saw before turning the corner was the Duke, still standing in the shadows, watching her go. Lysandra woke to sunlight. It streamed through tall windows, fractured into rainbows by frost patterns on the glass, and fell across the most comfortable bed she'd ever known. For a moment, one blessed, confused moment, she forgot where she was. Forgot everything that had happened. Then memory returned like cold water, and she sat up with a gasp. The room around her was beautiful in an understated way. Cream walls, dark wood furniture, a fireplace where embers still glowed from a fire someone must have tended during the night. Her torn cloak lay folded on a chair, cleaned. The Duke's heavy cloak hung beside it. A soft knock at the door made her pull the blankets up instinctively. "Miss." A young woman's voice, tentative and kind. "May I come in?" Yes." The maid who entered was perhaps Lysandra's age, with auburn hair tucked under a crisp white cap. She carried a tray that smelled like heaven: fresh bread, butter, jam, tea that actually steamed. "Good morning, miss. I'm Sarah. Mrs. Brennan sent me to help you dress and bring breakfast." She set the tray on a side table, then moved to the wardrobe. "We've prepared some clothes for you." They were the late Duchess's, but Mrs. Brennan thought, "Well, you're of a similar size, and His Grace said you were to have whatever you needed." The late Duchess. Lysandra's stomach twisted. "I can't possibly." She would have wanted them used, miss. Sarah's smile was gentle. "Better worn than gathering dust. That's what Mrs. Brennan always says." Lysandra wanted to argue, to refuse, to insist she didn't deserve any of this. But she was also desperately hungry and wearing only a borrowed nightgown, so she nodded mutely. After Sarah helped her wash and dress in a simple day gown of soft blue wool, Lysandra was left alone with her breakfast. She ate slowly, cautiously, half expecting someone to burst in and snatch it away.
Tell her it was all a mistake.
That charity had its limits. But no one came. A different knock, heavier this time. Mrs. Brennan entered with a tall, thin man carrying a physician's bag. "Good morning, dear," the housekeeper said warmly. "Feeling better? This is Dr. Aldrich. His Grace requested he examine you, just to be certain you're well." The physician had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Nothing invasive, I promise. Just a few questions, and a simple examination. May I? Lysandra nodded, though tension coiled in her stomach. She'd seen enough physicians in the past 2 years to last a lifetime. But Dr. Aldrich was different. He asked about her symptoms, the exhaustion, the dizzy spells she'd been having, her appetite, with genuine interest rather than judgment. When he examined her hands, her eyes, felt the pulse at her wrist, his touch was clinical but gentle. Malnutrition, he murmured, making notes. Exhaustion. Some frostbite on the toes, but minor. He paused, frowning slightly at something. Have you been feeling ill? Nauseous, perhaps? Headaches. Sometimes, Lysandra admitted. But I assumed it was just… He made another note, his frown deepening. There are some unusual markers in your coloring. Nothing alarming but curious. I'd like to do a more thorough examination in a few days, once you've rested. For now, rest, regular meals, warmth. You're severely depleted. After he left, Mrs. Brennan lingered. You'll want to explore a bit, I imagine. Feel free to go anywhere except His Grace's private chambers, 3rd floor, West Wing. Everything else is open to you. I don't want to intrude, dear girl. Mrs. Brennan's expression was kind but firm. Your guest. Guests don't intrude. They belong. It was such a simple statement, but it made Lysandra's throat tight. After Mrs. Brennan departed, Lysandra sat alone for a while, uncertain. What did one do as a guest in a duke's home? Especially when one had been thrown away like refuse mere hours ago. A small sound at the door made her turn. The boy from last night, Ether, stood in the doorway, half hidden behind the frame. He held a wooden toy horse, beautifully carved and painted. His dark eyes watched her with solemn curiosity. Hello, Lysandra said softly. He didn't respond immediately, just studied her. Then, Papa said you were cold. Do you like horses? They're warm. The unexpected statement surprised a laugh from her, the first genuine one in months. I do like horses. Is that one yours? Ether nodded and crept into the room, settling himself on the rug before the fireplace. He set the horse down carefully, then looked up at her. You can sit here too, if you want. Lysandra slid from the bed and joined him, tucking her borrowed dress around her legs. The fire crackled pleasantly. Ether didn't pepper her with questions the way children often did. He simply played quietly, moving his horse in gentle patterns across the carpet. What's his name? Lysandra asked. Frost. Because he's gray like winter. Ether glanced at her. What's your name? Lysandra. That's pretty. He went back to his horse, then added. Mama's name was Alara. That was pretty too. The simple past tense struck Lysandra with unexpected force. I'm sorry you lost her. Ether shrugged with the acceptance of a child who'd had years to adjust. Papa says she's with the stars now, watching over us. He paused. Do you think that's true? I think, Lysandra said carefully, that people we love never really leave us. Not all the way. Ether considered this, then offered her the horse. You can play too. They sat together in comfortable silence, and Lysandra felt something in her chest ease. When had she last felt simply peaceful? Later, after Ether was called away for his lessons, Lysandra ventured into the hallways. The Draven estate was vast, all dark wood and stone, Gothic and imposing but maintained with obvious care. She felt like an intruder, tiptoeing through someone else's life. In a long gallery, she stopped before a portrait. The woman in the painting was beautiful. Auburn hair, warm brown eyes, a gentle smile. She wore a green dress and held a book in her lap. There was kindness in her painted face, and something else. Wisdom, perhaps. Peace. The Duchess Alara. Lysandra startled. Mrs. Brennan had appeared silently beside her. She was lovely, Lysandra said quietly. Inside and out. Mrs. Brennan's expression grew sad. Gone these 3 years. Carriage accident, they said. The Duke hasn't been the same since. She glanced at Lysandra. You're the first person he's brought to Dravenfall since her death. The first guest of any kind. Why would a grieving Duke, isolated for years, suddenly rescue a stranger. What are your thoughts? The weight of that statement settled over Lysandra like a cloak. I don't understand why he helped me. Mrs. Brennan smiled mysteriously. Perhaps you should ask him yourself. As evening fell, Lysandra found herself drawn to a light spilling from beneath a door. She knocked hesitantly. Enter. The study was exactly what she'd expected. Shelves of books, a massive desk covered in papers and maps, a fire burning low. Duke Kalen sat behind the desk, still dressed in black, his face illuminated by lamplight. He looked up, and something flickered in his expression. Lysandra, are you well?
Yes.
Thanks to you. She stepped inside, feeling awkward. I wanted to thank you for your kindness. I know I can't repay. You owe me no thanks.
He set down his pen.
Stay as long as you need. But why? The question burst from her. You don't know me. I'm disgraced. Worthless. A discarded wife who couldn't even. Her voice broke. Kalen rose, moving around the desk with fluid grace. You are neither disgraced nor worthless. And I do not rescue people out of pity. Then why? He was close now, studying her with that intense, unreadable gaze. Then his eyes dropped to her left wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up slightly. You have a birthmark, he said quietly. On your left wrist. Lysandra froze. She'd always hidden it, a crescent-shaped mark she'd been self-conscious about since childhood. How could he possibly know? How? My wife, Kalen said, his voice taking on a strange quality. Before she died, she had visions. Dreams. The physicians said it was fever, delirium from her illness. But she described things she couldn't have known. He paused. She described you. A woman with a crescent mark, she said. He stopped, as if the words were difficult. She said you would bring light back to Dravenfall. Lysandra stared at him, her heart pounding. That's impossible. I thought so too. His gaze met hers. Until I saw you in the snow. The silence in the study stretched between them like a held breath. Lysandra stared at the Duke, her mind reeling. Visions. Prophecies. A dead woman's dreams about a stranger with a birthmark. It was madness, the kind of thing you heard in fairy tales, not in real life. And she was done with fairy tales. You can't be serious, she whispered. Kalen moved to the window, his back to her, silhouette dark against the frost-covered glass. Illyra's visions began 6 months before she died. At first, they were simple, dreams about the garden in spring, about Ether's future. The physicians said it was a fever, that her illness was affecting her mind. His voice grew quieter. But she described events that later came to pass. Small things. A servant's pregnancy, before anyone knew. A storm that destroyed the east fence. A letter from the king that arrived word for word as she'd recited it. Coincidence, Lysandra said, but her voice lacked conviction. That's what I told myself. He turned to face her. Until her final vision. The night before she died, she gripped my hand and described a woman. Your height, your coloring, your eyes. She described the crescent birthmark on your left wrist. She said, when you find her in the snow, bring her home. She will bring light back to Dravenfall when the darkness comes. Lysandra's hand instinctively moved to cover her wrist. I don't understand. I'm nobody. I couldn't even. The familiar shame rose in her throat. I couldn't even do the one thing expected of me. Kalen crossed the room in 3 strides, his intensity making her step back. But his voice, when he spoke, was gentle. Perhaps you were expected to do the wrong things by the wrong people. The words struck something deep inside her, but she shook her head. You can't believe in prophecies. You're a duke, a man of reason. I believe in what I've seen. His steel-gray eyes held hers. I wasn't passing by coincidence that night, Lysandra. I've been searching. Every Christmas for 3 years, I've ridden these roads, hoping to find the woman from Illyra's vision. Hoping I wasn't mad for believing my dying wife's final words. And you think I'm... She couldn't finish the sentence. It was too absurd.
Too heavy.
I think you were in that snow for a reason. I think I found you for a reason.
He paused.
I think perhaps we both need to discover what that reason is. Before Lysandra could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. Ether peeked around the door, his toy horse tucked under one arm. Papa? It's story time. The transformation in Kalen was immediate, his severe expression softening, his posture easing. So it is. Did you pick a book? Ether nodded, then looked shyly at Lysandra. Will you come too? Papa does the voices, but he doesn't know the lady voices very well. Despite everything, Lysandra smiled. I'd be honored. In the days that followed, Lysandra found herself drawn into the quiet rhythms of Dravenfall. Ether began appearing at her door each morning, sometimes with his toy horse, sometimes with books, sometimes simply with his solemn presence. They would sit by the fire in her room or in the library, and slowly, the boy's reserved nature began to crack. He showed her his collection of stones from the garden. She taught him how to braid ribbons for the horses in the stable. They built elaborate cities from blocks in the playroom, and when snow fell fresh and thick, they bundled up and built a snowman in the courtyard. He needs a nose, Ether declared, studying their creation critically. A carrot?
No.
A fancy nose. He's a gentleman snowman. Lysandra laughed, really laughed, and the sound surprised her. When did laughter become so foreign? From an upper window, Kalen watched them. Mrs. Brennan found him there one afternoon, his expression unreadable as Lysandra chased Ether through the snow, both of them pink-cheeked and breathless with joy. The boys smiling again, the housekeeper observed quietly. Haven't seen that in months. No, Kalen agreed, his voice tight with something Mrs. Brennan couldn't quite name. And you, Your Grace? What are you feeling? He didn't answer, simply turned from the window and returned to his study. But the staff noticed. Sarah whispered to the cook that His Grace had started taking dinner in the main dining room instead of his study, always when Miss Lysandra was there. The groundskeeper mentioned that the Duke had ordered fresh flowers for the guest wing. Small changes, but changes nonetheless. The letter arrived on the fourth day. Kalen read it at breakfast, his jaw tightening with each line. When he finished, he set it down with controlled precision, but Lysandra saw the tension in his shoulders. Bad news? She asked quietly. Ether was absorbed in his porridge, building a mountain of butter on top. Political news. The same thing. He caught himself, glanced at his son, and changed the subject. Ether, don't play with your food. But Lysandra had seen the royal seal on the letter. That afternoon, she was returning from the library when she heard voices in the servants' corridor. She knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, but her own name stopped her. Can't stay unmarried forever, one of the maids was saying. He needs heirs, alliances. The court's been pressuring him for years. What about the girl? That was Thomas, the driver. Miss Lysandra? Oh, she's sweet enough, but come now. She's just charity, isn't she? A temporary kindness. The Duke will marry Lady Isolde Thorne, everyone knows it. Wealthy, connected, ambitious. A proper match. Lysandra's stomach dropped. Lady Isolde Thorne. Of course. A duke needed a duchess of standing, not a disgraced, barren cast-off found in the snow. She retreated to her room, something cold settling in her chest. The past few days had been, she didn't even have words for it. Peaceful. I'm almost happy. She'd let herself forget that this was temporary. That she was nobody. That the Duke had duties and responsibilities that had nothing to do with visions or prophecies. She began to withdraw, subtly but deliberately. When Ether came to her door, she pleaded tiredness. At dinner, she was polite but distant. She stopped wandering the state, stopped reading in the library, stopped letting herself feel at home. Because this wasn't her home. It never would be. Kalen noticed immediately. On the second day of her withdrawal, he found her in the garden, wrapped in a cloak, staring at nothing. You're pulling away, he said without preamble. Lysandra didn't turn. I shouldn't be here. That's not your decision to make. Isn't it? She finally looked at him. You have duties, Your Grace. Responsibilities. A son who needs a proper mother, not a temporary guest. A duchy that needs alliances. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm just a reminder of failure. For both of us. Kalen's expression darkened. You are not a failure. Then what am I? The question burst from her. A prophecy? A vision? I'm a woman who couldn't even fulfill the most basic expectation of her existence. I have nothing to offer you or your son or this house. And yet ether smiles when you're near. The staff says the halls feel warmer. Even I, he stopped, frustration flashing across his face. You are not leaving. You can't command me to stay.
No.
His voice dropped, something raw entering it. But I can ask. They stood in the falling snow, the space between them charged with unspoken things. Lysandra wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe she could stay, could belong, could be more than the broken thing she'd been labeled. But wanting wasn't enough. It never had been. I need to think, she whispered, and fled back to the house. That night, she found a package outside her door. Inside was a dress, not borrowed, but clearly made for her. Deep emerald velvet with delicate silver embroidery. Elegant and beautiful. Tucked beside it was a card in strong, dark handwriting. The Christmas ball. 3 days.
Come with me.
Lysandra held the dress to her chest, her heart hammering. A ball. In public. On his arm. What was he asking? And more terrifyingly, what did she want to answer? Dravenfall transformed in the 3 days before the ball. Servants hurried through corridors with pressed linens and polished silver. The carriage was cleaned until it gleamed. Even the horses seemed to sense the occasion, prancing with extra spirit when the groomsmen led them out. Lysandra watched the preparations with growing anxiety. She'd agreed to attend. How could she refuse after Kalen's invitation? But doubt gnawed at her constantly.
A ball.
At the Royal Winter Palace. With nobles who would take one look at her and know she didn't belong. Stop fidgeting, dear, Mrs. Brennan said gently as she adjusted the emerald gown. You'll wrinkle the silk. Lysandra stood before the mirror in her room, barely recognizing the woman reflected there. The dress fit perfectly. How had Kalen known her measurements? The deep green bringing out the color in her eyes. Her hair had been styled by Sarah into an elegant arrangement, soft curls framing her face. She looked almost beautiful, almost like someone who belonged on a duke's arm. Almost. What if someone recognizes me? Lysandra whispered. What if the Valas are there? Mrs. Brennan's hands stilled on her shoulders. Then you hold your head high and remember that you're under Draven protection now. No one would dare. They already dared once. They threw me into the snow on Christmas night. Her voice broke slightly. What's to stop them from exposing me? From telling everyone what I am, what I'm not? What you are, Mrs. Brennan said firmly, turning Lysandra to face her, is a brave young woman who survived cruelty and had the strength to keep living. That's worth more than any title or bloodline. A soft knock interrupted them. Sarah peeked in, her eyes wide. Miss? His Grace is waiting. Lysandra's heart hammered. This was it. The moment she could still refuse, could claim illness, could retreat back to the safety of her room and go, Mrs. Brennan said gently, giving her a small push. Before you think yourself out of it. Kalen stood at the base of the grand staircase, dressed in formal black with a deep blue waistcoat that somehow made his steel-gray eyes even more striking. He was speaking quietly with Ether, who wore his own miniature formal attire and looked deeply unhappy about it. Do I have to stay the whole time? The boy was asking. Only until the children's hour ends. Then Mrs. Brennan will bring you home. Kalen's hand rested gently on his son's shoulder. I know you don't like crowds, but it's important that. He looked up and saw Lysandra descending the stairs. Whatever he'd been about to say died on his lips. He simply stared, something raw and unguarded flashing across his usually controlled expression. You look. He stopped, started again. You look radiant. Heat flooded Lysandra's cheeks. Thank you. The dress is beautiful. I don't know how to repay. You wear it, Kalen said simply. That's enough payment. He offered his arm, his voice dropping lower. Stay beside me tonight. You are under my protection. No one will dare harm you. It was both a promise and a command, and Lysandra found herself believing it. The royal winter palace blazed with light against the night sky. Carriages lined the circular drive, depositing nobles in glittering gowns and formal attire. Music and laughter spilled from open doors. Everything gleamed: the ice sculptures, the gold-trimmed windows, the jewels adorning every throat and wrist. Lysandra's courage nearly failed. "I can't." "You can." Kaelin's hand covered hers on his arm. "Just breathe." They ascended the steps together, Ether trailing behind with Mrs. Brennan. The moment they entered the ballroom, heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. "Is that Duke Draven? Who is she? I've never seen her before. Is that his new?" "I thought he was to marry Lady Isolde." Lysandra felt every stare like a physical weight. Beside her, Kaelin seemed utterly unbothered, his expression cool and remote as he led her deeper into the glittering chaos. "Your Grace." A woman's voice, melodious and perfectly modulated. "How wonderful to see you." Lady Isolde Thorne materialized before them like something from a dream or a nightmare. She was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful. Perfect features, perfect posture, perfect dress of shimmering gold. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were calculating as they swept over Lysandra and dismissed her in the same glance. "Lady Isolde," Kaelin said politely but without warmth. "Your Grace, I've been told our families are in discussions." She moved closer, her hand brushing his arm with practiced ease. "How delightful. We have so much to plan." Lysandra felt herself shrinking, becoming invisible. Of course. This was the woman the servants had mentioned. Wealthy, connected, ambitious. Everything a duke needed. Everything Lysandra wasn't. "I'm afraid you've been misinformed," Kaelin said coolly. "I've made no such agreements." Isolde's smile never wavered. "Oh, but surely your advisors have discussed the advantages." "I make my own decisions regarding marriage, Lady Isolde." His tone could have frozen wine. "Now if you'll excuse us." He guided Lysandra away, leaving Isolde standing with her perfect smile cracking slightly. "I'm sorry," Lysandra whispered. "I'm causing problems for you." "You're causing nothing." Kaelin's jaw was tight. She's been angling for this match for years. "My advisors think it's practical. I think it's intolerable." Before Lysandra could respond, she saw them. Across the ballroom, near the champagne fountain, stood Lady Cordelia Vale. And beside her, looking uncomfortable in formal attire, was Tristan. Lysandra's breath stopped. Panic seized her throat. "I need to leave." "Please, I can't." But it was too late. Lady Cordelia had seen her. The older woman's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with malicious delight. She began moving through the crowd with predatory grace, Tristan following reluctantly. "Lysandra?" Lady Cordelia's voice dripped false sweetness. "My dear, what are you doing here? Surely you haven't deceived some poor lord about your condition?" Every word was calculated to wound, to expose, to humiliate. Lysandra felt the familiar shame rising, the old instinct to apologize, to shrink, to accept the blame. But then Kaelin stepped forward. His presence seemed to fill the space, commanding and cold. "Lady Vale, I see your manners haven't improved." Lady Cordelia blanched, finally recognizing who stood beside her former daughter-in-law. "Your Grace, I didn't realize. Is Miss Lysandra my guest?" Kaelin's voice could have cut glass. "That she is under Draven protection? I trust you'll extend her the respect due to anyone associated with my house. Or perhaps you'd like to explain to this assembled company why you saw fit to cast a defenseless woman into the snow on Christmas night." The color drained from Lady Cordelia's face. Around them, nearby nobles had gone quiet, listening with avid interest. "There were circumstances," Lady Cordelia stammered. "Family matters." Family matters that left her barefoot and bleeding in a snowstorm. Kaelin's eyes were ice. "How very Christian of you. On Christmas, no less." Tristan finally spoke, his voice weak. "Your Grace, perhaps we could discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss. Stay away from her. If I hear you've so much as spoken her name, you'll discover exactly how unpleasant I can be." Kalen offered Lysandra his arm.
Come.
The air has grown foul here. He led her away through the stunned crowd, and Lysandra's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking the snow-covered gardens, the cold air a shock after the stifling ballroom. I shouldn't have come, Lysandra said, humiliated, tears threatening. I don't belong here. You belong wherever you choose to stand. Kalen turned to face her, his expression fierce. Don't let them make you small again, Lysandra. You survived their cruelty. You're still here. That makes you stronger than any of them. But You are not what they said you were. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Inside, the music swelled, violins and cellos weaving together in something beautiful. For a moment, Lysandra let herself believe him. Then the sound of breaking glass. Screams. Kalen's expression hardened instantly. Stay here. But Lysandra's eyes had caught movement through the ballroom windows, a shadow near the children's viewing gallery, where Ether sat with the other noble children. Ether, she gasped and ran. Dravenfall transformed in the 3 days before the ball. Servants hurried through corridors with pressed linens and polished silver. The carriage was cleaned until it gleamed. Even the horses seemed to sense the occasion, prancing with extra spirit when the groomsmen led them out. Lysandra watched the preparations with growing anxiety. She'd agreed to attend. How could she refuse after Kalen's invitation? But doubt gnawed at her constantly. A ball. At the Royal Winter Palace. With nobles who would take one look at her and know she didn't belong. Stop fidgeting, dear, Mrs. Brennan said gently as she adjusted the emerald gown. You'll wrinkle the silk. Lysandra stood before the mirror in her room, barely recognizing the woman reflected there. The dress fit perfectly. How'd Kalen known her measurements? The deep green bringing out the color in her eyes. Her hair had been styled by Sarah into an elegant arrangement, soft curls framing her face. She looked almost beautiful, almost like someone who belonged on a duke's arm. Almost. What if someone recognizes me? Lysandra whispered. What if the Valas are there? Mrs. Brennan's hands stilled on her shoulders. Then you hold your head high, and remember that you're under Draven protection now. No one would dare. They already dared once. They threw me into the snow on Christmas night. Her voice broke slightly. What's to stop them from exposing me? From telling everyone what I am, what I'm not? What you are, Mrs. Brennan said firmly, turning Lysandra to face her, is a brave young woman who survived cruelty and had the strength to keep living. That's worth more than any title or bloodline. A soft knock interrupted them. Sarah peeked in, her eyes wide. Miss, His Grace is waiting. Lysandra's heart hammered. This was it. The moment she could still refuse, could claim illness, could retreat back to the safety of her room, and go, Mrs. Brennan said gently, giving her a small push. Before you think yourself out of it. Kalen stood at the base of the grand staircase, dressed in formal black with a deep blue waistcoat that somehow made his steel-gray eyes even more striking. He was speaking quietly with Ether, who wore his own miniature formal attire and looked deeply unhappy about it. Do I have to stay the whole time? The boy was asking. Only until the children's hour ends. Then Mrs. Brennan will bring you home. Kalen's hand rested gently on his son's shoulder. I know you don't like crowds, but it's important that. He looked up and saw Lysandra descending the stairs. Whatever he'd been about to say died on his lips. He simply stared, something raw and unguarded flashing across his usually controlled expression. You look. He stopped, started again. You look radiant. Heat flooded Lysandra's cheeks. Thank you. The dress is beautiful. I don't know how to repay. You wear it, Kalen said simply. That's enough payment. He offered his arm, his voice dropping lower. Stay beside me tonight. You are under my protection. No one will dare harm you. It was both a promise and a command, and Lysandra found herself believing it. The Royal Winter Palace blazed with light against the night sky. Carriages lined the circular drive, depositing nobles in glittering gowns and formal attire. Music and laughter spilled from open doors. Everything gleamed, the ice sculptures, the gold-trimmed windows, the jewels adorning every throat and wrist. Lysandra's courage nearly failed. I can't. You can. Kaelin's hand covered hers on his arm. Just breathe. They ascended the steps together, Ether trailing behind with Mrs. Brennan. The moment they entered the ballroom, heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Is that Duke Draven? Who is she? I've never seen her before. Is that his new? I thought he was to marry Lady Isolde. Lysandra felt every stare like a physical weight. Beside her, Kaelin seemed utterly unbothered, his expression cool and remote as he led her deeper into the glittering chaos. Your Grace. A woman's voice, melodious and perfectly modulated. How wonderful to see you. Lady Isolde Thorne materialized before them like something from a dream or a nightmare. She was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful. Perfect features, perfect posture, perfect dress of shimmering gold. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were calculating as they swept over Lysandra and dismissed her in the same glance. Lady Isolde, Kaelin said politely but without warmth. Your Grace, I've been told our families are in discussions. She moved closer, her hand brushing his arm with practiced ease. How delightful. We have so much to plan. Lysandra felt herself shrinking, becoming invisible. Of course. This was the woman the servants had mentioned. Wealthy, connected, ambitious. Everything a duke needed. Everything Lysandra wasn't. I'm afraid you've been misinformed, Kaelin said coolly. I've made no such agreements. Isolde's smile never wavered. Oh, but surely your advisors have discussed the advantages. I make my own decisions regarding marriage, Lady Isolde. His tone could have frozen wine. Now if you'll excuse us. He guided Lysandra away, leaving Isolde standing with her perfect smile cracking slightly. I'm sorry, Lysandra whispered. I'm causing problems for you. You're causing nothing. Kaelin's jaw was tight. She's been angling for this match for years. My advisors think it's practical. I think it's intolerable. Before Lysandra could respond, she saw them. Across the ballroom, near the champagne fountain, stood Lady Cordelia Vale. And beside her, looking uncomfortable in formal attire, was Tristan. Lysandra's breath stopped. Panic seized her throat. I need to leave. Please, I can't. But it was too late. Lady Cordelia had seen her. The older woman's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with malicious delight. She began moving through the crowd with predatory grace, Tristan following reluctantly. Lysandra? Lady Cordelia's voice stripped false sweetness. My dear, what are you doing here? Surely you haven't deceived some poor lord about your condition? Every word was calculated to wound, to expose, to humiliate. Lysandra felt the familiar shame rising, the old instinct to apologize, to shrink, to accept the blame. But then Kaelin stepped forward. His presence seemed to fill the space, commanding and cold. Lady Vale, I see your manners haven't improved. Lady Cordelia blanched, finally recognizing who stood beside her former daughter-in-law. Your Grace, I didn't realize. That Miss Lysandra, my guest? Kaelin's voice could have cut glass. That she is under Draven protection? I trust you'll extend her the respect due to anyone associated with my house. Or perhaps you'd like to explain to this assembled company why you saw fit to cast a defenseless woman into the snow on Christmas night. The color drained from Lady Cordelia's face. Around them, nearby nobles had gone quiet, listening with avid interest. There were circumstances, Lady Cordelia stammered. Family matters. Family matters that left her barefoot and bleeding in a snowstorm. Kaelin's eyes were ice. How very Christian of you. On Christmas, no less. Tristan finally spoke, his voice weak. Your Grace, perhaps we could discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss. Stay away from her. If I hear you've so much as spoken her name, you'll discover exactly how unpleasant I can be. Kaelin offered Lysandra his arm.
Come.
The air has grown foul here. He led her away through the stunned crowd, and Lysandra's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking the snow-covered gardens, the cold air shock after the stifling ballroom. "I shouldn't have come," Lysandra said, humiliated, tears threatening. "I don't belong here. I'm just. You belong wherever you choose to stand." Kalen turned to face her, his expression fierce. "Don't let them make you small again, Lysandra. You survived their cruelty. You're still here. That makes you stronger than any of them. But you're not what they said you were." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Inside, the music swelled, violins and cellos weaving together in something beautiful. For a moment, Lysandra let herself believe him. Then, the sound of breaking glass.
Screams.
Kalen's expression hardened instantly. "Stay here." But Lysandra's eyes had caught movement through the ballroom windows, a shadow near the children's viewing gallery, where Ether sat with the other noble children. "Ether," she gasped and ran. The letter lay on Kalen's desk like a coiled serpent. Lysandra stared at the wax seal, the Vale family crest, a hawk clutching laurel branches, and felt her stomach turn. The guard had found it on one of the captured assassins, sealed but not yet delivered. "Are you certain you want to read it?" Kalen asked quietly. He stood beside her, his presence solid and reassuring, but even he couldn't shield her from what those pages might contain. Lysandra's hands trembled as she broke the seal. The handwriting was familiar, her former mother-in-law's precise, elegant script. She began to read aloud, her voice growing weaker with each line. "Lord Thorne, the Draven matter must be handled with the same discretion as before. The method used previously proved effective. Ensure it appears accidental. The boy is the priority. Once removed, the Duke will have no choice but to accept our arrangement. Isolde will secure the marriage, and Dravenfall's resources will be ours to direct. Do not fail as you did with the first Duchess." The paper slipped from Lysandra's fingers. "They killed her," she whispered. "Your wife." It wasn't an accident. Kalen's expression had gone deadly still, but she could see the fury burning beneath the surface. "We suspected. Now we have proof. And my family," Lysandra's voice broke. "They're part of this. They've been part of it all along." A soft knock interrupted them. Dr. Aldrich entered, his expression grave. "Your Grace, Miss Lysandra. I need to speak with you both. Privately." Something in his tone made Lysandra's heart sink. They sat, Kalen behind his desk, Lysandra in the chair beside it, the physician standing before them with his notes. "I've completed my analysis of Miss Lysandra's blood samples," Dr. Aldrich began carefully. "The unusual markers I noticed during my initial examination, I've identified them." He paused, seeming to gather himself. "You've been poisoned, Lady Lysandra, with moon wisteria, a slow-acting toxin that suppresses fertility and causes a host of other symptoms: exhaustion, nausea, dizziness. In small, regular doses, it's nearly undetectable." The world tilted. Lysandra gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white.
"What?"
The word came out as barely a whisper. "Based on the concentration in your system, I'd estimate you've been exposed for at least 2 years. Possibly longer." Dr. Aldrich's expression was sympathetic. "It would have been administered in food or drink. Something you consumed regularly." 2 years. Her entire marriage. The tea her mother-in-law insisted she drink each morning for her health. The special herbs added to her meals to aid conception. "I was never infertile," Lysandra said, the truth shattering something fundamental inside her. "They poisoned me. They made me believe I was broken so they could." Her voice cracked. "So they could throw me away and arrange another marriage, another dowry." Everything she believed about herself, every moment of shame, every prayer that went unanswered, every physician who'd looked at her with pity, all of it built on a lie. A deliberate, calculated lie. Can it be reversed? Kalen's voice was tight with controlled rage. "With treatment, yes. I have an antidote that should purge the toxin from her system, but it will take time. Weeks, possibly months." Dr. Aldrich hesitated. "As for her fertility, there's no guarantee. The prolonged exposure may have caused permanent damage. Or she may recover fully. I simply don't know. Lysandra barely heard him. She stood abruptly, stumbling toward the door. Lysandra. Kaelin reached for her. I can't. She fled. She found herself in the garden, in the same spot where Kaelin had found her that first night. Snow fell soft and silent around her as she collapsed onto a frozen bench, her whole body shaking with sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal. They'd broken her.
Deliberately. Systematically.
Not because she was defective, but because she was convenient. A pawn in their schemes, to be used and discarded when she'd served her purpose. I wasn't broken, she gasped into her hands. I wasn't broken. The sound of footsteps crunching in snow made her look up. Kaelin approached slowly then, heedless of his fine clothes and the wet snow, knelt before her. Lysandra, he said softly. They broke me on purpose. The words tore from her throat. Everything I believed about myself, every moment I felt worthless and inadequate, they created that. They poisoned me, and then blamed me for being poisoned. Kaelin pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against his chest, sobbing. He held her tightly, one hand cradling her head, the other wrapped around her back. He didn't offer platitudes or false comfort. He simply held her and let her grieve for the years stolen, for the lies she believed, for the woman she might have been without their cruelty. When her sobs finally quieted, he spoke. They will pay for this. I promise you that. Later, in his study, Dr. Aldrich explained the treatment. A series of herbal infusions, careful monitoring, rest and nourishment. He couldn't promise full recovery, but he could promise hope. It doesn't matter, Kaelin said quietly. Both Lysandra and the physician looked at him in surprise. Your Grace? Dr. Aldrich asked. Kaelin's eyes met Lysandra's. Your worth is not contingent on bearing children. Not to me. Not to Ether. You are valuable because of who you are, not what you can produce. The simple statement, delivered with absolute conviction, made fresh tears spring to Lysandra's eyes. But these were different.
Cleaner.
After Dr. Aldrich left, Kaelin spread papers across his desk, evidence he'd been quietly gathering for weeks. The conspiracy runs deeper than we knew, he said. The Valles, the Thorns, and several other noble families. They wanted to force me into a political marriage to gain control of Dravenfall's resources and influence. When I refused their first attempts, they murdered Alara and made it look like an accident. And now they're trying again, Lysandra said, her mind clearing as anger replaced grief. Using Isolde.
Yes.
But I've been documenting everything, bribes, forged documents, connections to known criminals. With this letter and the assassin's testimony, I finally have enough to bring before the crown. What will you do? Kaelin's expression was cold. Destroy them. Completely. But I need proof solid enough that even their political connections can't save them. Lysandra straightened in her chair, a new resolve settling over her. I can help. I know the Vale household, their routines, their secrets. I know where my former mother-in-law keeps her private correspondence. Absolutely not. Kaelin's response was immediate. I won't put you in danger. They took everything from me, Lysandra said fiercely. My health, my confidence, years of my life. I want it back, not things but my truth. Let me help you expose them. Their eyes locked, and something passed between them. Understanding, respect, partnership. We'll discuss it, Kaelin said finally, though his reluctance was clear. That evening, they sat by the fire in the library. Ether had fallen asleep between them, his head on Lysandra's lap, still clutching his toy horse. The boy had been unusually clingy since the ball, as if sensing the tension in the household. Lysandra stroked his dark hair gently, and when she looked up, she found Kaelin watching them both with an expression that made her heart ache. When this is over, he said quietly, you don't have to stay. I want you to know that. You'll be safe, vindicated, free to go wherever you choose. I won't hold you to any obligation. Lysandra's hand stilled. What if I want to stay? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with everything unspoken. Kaelin's steel-gray eyes searched hers, and she saw hope there, carefully guarded but unmistakable. Then I would. A sharp knock interrupted them. A servant entered, looking apologetic. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. Lady Isolde Thorne has arrived. She insists on speaking with you about the engagement arrangement. She says it's urgent and refuses to leave until you receive her. Kaelin's jaw tightened. He looked at Lysandra, at Ether sleeping peacefully, then back at the servant. Tell Lady Isolde, he said coldly, that she is mistaken about any engagement. And if she doesn't leave my property within the next 10 minutes, I'll have her removed. The servant's eyes widened. Your Grace, she has her father with her. Lord Thorne. He says they have documents. Documents they forged, no doubt. Kaelin stood, carefully, so as not to wake Ether. I'll handle this. Lysandra, stay here with Ether. Lock the door after I leave. Kaelin. He paused at the door, and for the first time, she'd used his given name. Their eyes met. Be careful, she whispered. Always. Then he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. Lysandra listened to his footsteps fade, then the sound of voices raised in the entrance hall. She looked down at Ether, still sleeping peacefully, then at the crackling fire. Something was about to break. She could feel it. The conspiracy, the lies, the careful machinations, they were all converging towards something inevitable. She just hoped they'd all survive it. The voices in the entrance hall carried clearly through Dravenfall's stone corridors. Lysandra stood frozen in the library doorway, Ether still asleep inside, her hand on the frame as she listened to the confrontation unfolding below. Your Grace, surely you must see reason. That was Lord Thorne, his voice oily with false concern. The engagement has been discussed at the highest levels. To refuse now would be seen as a political insult, not just to our family, but to the crown itself. I've made no such agreement. Kaelin's voice was ice. Perhaps not formally, Lady Isolde interjected, her tone perfectly modulating sweetness. But our families have been in negotiations for months. We have documents, witnesses. The royal emissary himself has come to witness the formal announcement. Lysandra's heart sank. A royal emissary. Official documents. This wasn't just social pressure. This was political entrapment. Your Grace, Isolde continued, I understand you've been grieving. It's natural to resist change. But Dravenfall needs stability. Young Ether needs a mother. And you need a proper duchess. Someone who understands the responsibilities, the alliances, I need, Kaelin said coldly, to be left alone to make my own decisions. Think of your son. Lord Thorne's voice rose. A duke cannot remain unmarried indefinitely. The boy needs legitimacy, protection, a future secured through proper alliances. Surely you wouldn't let personal sentiment endanger him. Lysandra closed her eyes. They were right, weren't they? A duke had duties. Ether needed security. She was just what had she told herself? The girl found in the snow. A temporary kindness. A distraction from duty. She couldn't let Kaelin sacrifice his son's future for her. Quietly, she retreated to her room and began pulling her few belongings from the wardrobe. The borrowed dresses, the simple items Mrs. Brennan had provided. She'd leave the emerald ball gown that belonged to a fantasy, not to reality. Her hands shook as she folded a chemise. Where would she go? She had no family now, no resources. But she'd survived before. She'd survive again. The door opened behind her. Miss Lysandra? Ether's small voice was confused. What are you doing? She turned to find him standing there, his toy horse dangling from one hand, his dark eyes too knowing for a child his age. I'm just organizing, she said weakly. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. Because of the lady downstairs. Ether. I don't want a new mama, if it's not you. The simple statement shattered something in Lysandra's chest. She knelt before him, taking his small hands in hers. Your father needs to make the best choice for you. For Dravenfall. Sometimes that means. Mama said something before she died. Ether's voice was quiet but firm. She told Papa he'd know when the right person came. That his heart would tell him. The boy looked up at her. Papa told me to always trust my heart. Why doesn't he trust him? From the mouth of a child. Lysandra pulled him into a hug, blinking back tears. Downstairs, Kaelin stared at the documents Lord Thorne had spread across his desk. They did indeed show months of correspondence, negotiations, agreements made by his advisors without his explicit approval. Technically, the betrothal wasn't binding without his signature. But politically, the emissary is waiting in the drawing room, Isolde said softly, moving closer. Your Grace, I know this isn't romantic, but it's practical, beneficial. I would be a good mother to Ether, a good partner to you. We could build something stable, secure. She was beautiful, Kaelin thought distantly. Accomplished. Connected. Everything a duchess should be on paper. She was also, his instinct screamed, involved in the conspiracy. He had suspicions but not proof. Not yet. I need time, he said. The emissary leaves tomorrow. Lord Thorne's voice hardened. We need your decision tonight. Kaelin's jaw tightened.
Trapped.
They'd trapped him neatly. A small hand tugged his coat. Ether had appeared silently, as children do, and now looked up at his father with solemn eyes. Papa? Can I talk to you? Alone. Ether, not now. Please. Something in his son's voice made Kaelin pause. He looked at Lord Thorne and Isolde. Excuse us. In his study, with the door closed, Ether stood before his father with the gravity of a general delivering crucial intelligence. I don't want a new mama if it's not Miss Lysandra, he said clearly. It's not that simple, son. Kaelin ran a hand through his hair. There are responsibilities, obligations. Mama said you'd know when the right person came. Ether's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You told me to trust my heart. Why don't you trust yours? The question struck like a blade. Kaelin stared at his son, this small, brave boy who'd lost his mother and was now facing the prospect of a stepmother chosen for politics rather than love. What does your heart say? He asked quietly. That Miss Lysandra is already my mama, in all the ways that matter. Ether's voice broke slightly. She reads to me.
She plays with me.
She saved me from the bad men. She makes you smile again, Papa. I see you watching her. Why can't you just choose her? Why indeed? Kaelin's decision crystallized at that moment. He knelt before his son, taking the boy's small face in his hands. You're absolutely right, he said. Thank you for reminding me what matters. He found Lysandra in her room, half-packed trunk open, tears streaming silently down her face as she folded clothes with shaking hands. You're leaving, he said from the doorway. She didn't turn. You have to marry her. I understand. I won't be in the way. And if I don't want you to go? Don't. Her voice broke. Don't make this harder. You need alliances. Political stability. A proper duchess. I'm just the girl you found in the snow. Kaelin crossed the room in 3 strides, turning her to face him, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. You are the woman who saved my son, he said fiercely. Who brought life back to this house? Who made me feel something other than grief for the first time in 3 years? You are brave and kind and strong, and He kissed her. It was desperate, raw, full of everything unspoken between them. Lysandra gasped against his mouth, her hands clutching his shirt, and then she was kissing him back with equal desperation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she whispered, But what about duty? Damn duty. His forehead rested against hers. I choose you. If you'll have me. If you'll have us. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. A servant burst in, wild-eyed. Your Grace. Forgive me, but we found something. In Lady Isolde's chambers. She left her writing case when she went to find you, and one of the maids noticed. There are letters. Coordinating with the assassins. Plans to... The servant's voice dropped. Plans to eliminate young Master Ether after the marriage. The blood drained from Kaelin's face. Then fury, pure and cold, replaced shock. Gather everyone, he said quietly. Every noble in the house. The emissary. Lord Thorne. Lady Isolde. Bring them to the Great Hall. Now. Within the hour, the Great Hall of Dravenfall blazed with light and tension. The royal emissary sat in a place of honor, confused but intrigued. Lord Thorne and Lady Isolde stood before Kaelin's seat, Isolde's perfect composure beginning to crack. Kaelin presented the evidence methodically. The letters found in Isolde's chambers, the testimony of captured assassins, the financial records showing payments from the Thorne family to known criminals. The letter from Lady Vale. The conspiracy laid bare. This is absurd. Lord Thorne blustered. Forgeries. Lies. But the emissary was reading the letters, his expression darkening. This is your daughter's handwriting, Lord Thorne. I've seen it in correspondence to the crown. Isolde's mask finally shattered. You don't understand. Dravenfall's resources, its influence, they should be used properly, not wasted on a grieving hermit. I would have made this duchy powerful again. By murdering a child? Kaelin's voice could have cut stone. Guards stepped forward at the emissary's signal. Lord Thorne and Lady Isolde were placed under arrest, their protests echoing as they were led away. When the hall had cleared except for a few trusted servants and the emissary, Kaelin stood. Lysandra had been watching from the gallery above, but now he gestured for her to descend. She came slowly, uncertainly, aware of every eye on her. Kaelin held out his hand. There is one more matter. I will remarry, but not for politics. Not for alliances or resources or duty. His eyes found hers. I choose the woman who has proven her loyalty, courage, and heart. The woman who saved my son and brought light back to Dravenfall. He extended his hand toward Lysandra. If she'll have me. The hall was utterly silent. Lysandra stood frozen, her heart hammering, hardly daring to believe what was happening. Yes, she whispered. Then, stronger, yes. The great hall remained suspended in stunned silence. Lysandra stood at the bottom of the gallery stairs, her hand trembling in Kaelin's, aware of every eye upon her. The royal emissary watched with keen interest. The remaining nobles whispered behind their hands. This was madness, a duke proposing to a woman with no title, no connections, no dowry. A woman who'd been discarded as defective. But Kaelin's eyes held only certainty. I'm not offering you a political arrangement, he said, his voice carrying through the hall. I'm offering you my heart, my home, and my son. Will you be my duchess? Through tears that blurred her vision, Lysandra whispered, yes. The hall erupted. Some nobles applauded, moved by the romance. Others muttered in outrage. This was unprecedented, improper, a duke marrying so far beneath his station. But Kaelin ignored them all, pulling Lysandra into his arms as if they were the only two people in the world. The emissary stood, a slight smile on his weathered face. I came here to witness a political alliance. Instead, I've witnessed something far rarer, justice and love in equal measure. I'll carry word to the crown that Duke Draven has chosen well. Spring arrived at Dravenfall like a promise kept. The estate that had seemed so cold and gothic in winter transformed into something magical. Gardens bloomed with early flowers. Birds nested in the eaves. And on a perfect May morning, beneath an arch of white roses, Lysandra became the Duchess of Dravenfall. The wedding was small, intimate, genuine. Everything her first marriage hadn't been. Mrs. Brennan wept openly. The staff lined the paths, beaming. And Ether, dressed in miniature formal attire, carried the rings with such solemn pride that Lysandra had to blink back tears. When Kaelin lifted her veil, his eyes were bright with emotion. The vows they spoke weren't the traditional words of duty and obedience. Instead, they promised partnership, healing, and choice. To build something new together. To honor the past while embracing the future. I choose you, Kaelin said softly, sliding the ring onto her finger. Every day, for the rest of my life, I choose you. And I choose you, Lysandra replied, her voice steady despite her tears. Both of you. She looked at Ether, who grinned so wide it seemed his face might split. The kiss that sealed their marriage was gentle, reverent, full of promise. In the weeks that followed, justice was served with methodical precision. The conspiracy unraveled completely under the Crown's investigation. The Vale family was stripped of their titles and wealth, their estate seized. Lysandra's former husband, Lord Tristan, was publicly shamed, exposed as a man who'd allowed his wife to be poisoned and discarded for financial gain. Lysandra attended the proceedings no longer as a victim but as the Duchess of Dravenfall. When Lady Cordelia saw her enter the courtroom, the old woman's face went white. "You," she hissed. "You were nothing. You still are." "I am," Lysandra said calmly, "the woman who survived your cruelty. The woman who exposed your crimes. The Duchess of Dravenfall." She paused. "And you are nothing but a criminal facing justice." The words should have felt triumphant. Instead, they simply felt necessary. Closure. Lord Thorne and Lady Isolde faced harsher sentences, exile and imprisonment for conspiracy to commit murder. As they were led away, Isolde's perfect mask finally crumbled entirely. "I could have made him powerful," she screamed. "I could have." The doors closed on her protests. Kaelin's hand found Lysandra's, squeezing gently. "It's over," he murmured. "Truly over." Summer bloomed into autumn, and Dravenfall settled into new rhythms. Lysandra took to her role as Duchess with unexpected grace, guided by Mrs. Brennan and her own instincts. She began small reforms, better wages for servants, education programs for the village children, support for young mothers. She and Ether were inseparable. The boy called her Mama now, unself-consciously, and her heart swelled every time. And with Kaelin, she discovered what marriage could be when built on genuine affection and respect. He made her laugh. She softened his edges. They talked late into the night, about everything and nothing. They built something real. It was during one of these perfect autumn afternoons, playing tag with Ether in the garden, that Lysandra suddenly felt the world tilt. She stumbled, and Ether caught her arm. "Mama? Are you all right?" "I'm fine, darling. Just dizzy." But when the dizziness persisted for 3 days, Mrs. Brennan insisted Dr. Aldrich be summoned. The physician examined her carefully, asked discreet questions, and then smiled in a way that made Lysandra's heart skip. "Your Grace," he said gently, "you're with child." The world stopped. That's not possible. The poison. The antidote worked. Your body has healed." Dr. Aldrich's smile widened. "You're approximately 2 months along. Healthy. Strong." Lysandra sat in stunned silence as the physician provided instructions and left. She was pregnant. The woman who'd been told she was barren, who'd been poisoned and discarded, she was going to have a baby. She found Kaelin in his study, the same room where he'd first revealed Alara's prophecy. He looked up as she entered, and whatever he saw in her expression made him stand immediately. "Lysandra? What's wrong?" "I'm pregnant." The words came out in a rush, half laugh, half sob. Kaelin froze. Then he crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands cupping her face, his eyes searching hers with wonder. "You're where?" "The antidote worked. Dr. Aldrich said I'm healthy." "That everything is," her voice broke. "I never thought. I didn't need this to be happy, but I know." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I never needed this to love you. But God, Lysandra, this is a miracle," she whispered. They held each other in the study, both crying and laughing, overwhelmed by the impossible gift they'd been given. Winter came again, full circle. On the first true snowfall, Lysandra went into labor. The birth was long but uncomplicated, and when Dr. Aldrich finally placed the baby in her arms, Lysandra wept at the perfect, tiny face. "A daughter," the physician announced. Kaelin sat beside her on the bed, Ether pressed against his side, all of them staring at the newest member of their family. "Alara," Lysandra said softly, looking at her husband. If you think. It's perfect." Kaelin's voice was thick with emotion. She would be honored. Baby Alara yawned, tiny fist waving, and Ether giggled. "She's so small." "You were that small once," Lysandra told him, pulling him close with her free arm. The household transformed again. The sound of a baby's cry, then her laughter, then her first words filled the halls. Ether proved to be a devoted big brother, always wanting to help, to hold her, to show her his toys. And Kalen. Kalen was a revelation as a father to a newborn. This man who'd seemed so cold and severe proved endlessly patient with midnight feedings and colic and the chaos of new life. Do you believe second chances can lead to greater happiness than first dreams? Share your thoughts below. Christmas Eve arrived, exactly 1 year after that terrible night. The Dravenfall Christmas tree stood magnificent in the great hall, decorated with golden ribbons and glass ornaments. Ether hung his additions carefully, explaining to baby Alara, who gurgled happily from her mother's arms, exactly why each one was important. Kalen stood back, watching his family, and felt something settle in his chest.
Peace.
Complete and utter peace. Papa, come help, Ether called. As Kalen moved to join them, Lysandra caught his hand. I need some air. Just for a moment. She bundled Alara in blankets and stepped outside. The snow fell soft and silent, just as it had that night a year ago. But everything was different now. She looked up at the stars, remembering the girl who'd wanted to disappear into the cold. Who'd believed she was worthless, broken, defective. That girl felt like a stranger now. The door opened behind her. Kalen emerged, wrapping his heavy cloak around both her and Alara. Cold, he asked.
No.
Lysandra leaned back against him, feeling his warmth, his solid presence. I've never been warmer. They stood together in the falling snow, their daughter between them, and Lysandra thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain, yes. The cruelty and betrayal. But also the resilience she hadn't known she possessed. The strength to survive. The courage to heal. When you discover that worth is inherent, the joy runs deeper for having forgotten it in the first place. Lysandra's story didn't begin the night she was thrown away. It began the night she was found. Not by a duke, but by herself. 7 years later, Dravenfall was unrecognizable from the cold, quiet estate it had once been. Ether, now 13, trained with weapons masters and tutors, preparing for the day he'd become duke. But he also laughed freely, rode his horses with abandon, and was unfailingly gentle with his younger siblings. Alara, at 7, was a spirited whirlwind who kept everyone on their toes. She had her mother's eyes and her father's determination, a combination that promised future challenges and joys in equal measure. And the twins, Barren and Cashin, for years old, raced through the halls with the fearlessness of children who'd never known anything but love and security. Lysandra, now a respected duchess, had used her position to reform laws around women's rights and marriage. She'd established homes for displaced women, education programs, legal protections against coerced marriages. The girl who'd been powerless had become a force for change. Kalen was no longer the grief-stricken widower hiding in his estate. He'd opened Dravenfall to the world again, using his influence for good, supporting his wife's reforms with his political weight and resources. Love had rebuilt him into someone stronger than he'd been before. On this particular Christmas Eve, the family gathered in the Great Hall. The children hung ornaments while Kalen and Lysandra watched, hands intertwined. Do you ever think about that night? Kalen asked quietly. A year before we met? Sometimes, Lysandra admitted. Not with pain anymore. More like wonder. That something so terrible could lead to something so beautiful. Alara's prophecy, Kalen mused. She said you'd bring light back to Dravenfall. I thought she meant something mystical, magical. And he squeezed her hand.
She did.
But the magic was simply you, your strength, your heart, your refusal to let cruelty define you. Lysandra looked at her family, at Ether carefully helping the twins reach a high branch, at Alara directing the entire operation with bossy affection, at the man beside her who'd chosen her when the world said she was worthless. She who was discarded as worthless became the heart of a dynasty. And every Christmas, they celebrated not just the season but the night everything changed. The night a duke found a woman in the snow. The night a broken woman found her own strength. The night a family began to heal. The night everything became possible. Thank you for joining Lysandra's journey from despair to joy. If this story touched your heart, Please subscribe for more tales of resilience and second chances. What part of Lysandra's transformation resonated most with you?